The microphone working now. It's better. Hi, friends, and welcome to my weekly stream about the Uno platform. My name is Jérôme Laban. I'm the CTO of the Uno platform open source project, and I spend about an hour every week taking a look at issues in the Uno platform code, or taking a look at the new features that have been added, or new samples, or answering questions. I see Jose has joined us today. Welcome, Jose. I'm sure you're going to have other questions like you did the last few times. So what's new this week? We have released a new preview version of the Uno platform for Figma tooling, and it's a good one. Adding lots of new features, and you can find all the details about this. And unless you don't know about the Figma tooling, this is a tool that we integrate into Figma that allows to export content that comes from Figma into your Uno application. And the interesting thing about this, and the technical detail about it, is that the plugin itself that's in Figma is also an Uno application, so it allows us to do all sorts of interesting things. So you can go to that blog post and go take a look at all the new features that were added here. And there are a few other interesting pieces that are coming up very soon. So stay tuned for this. So also last week, a lot of people have been asking for the ability to use an Entity Framework core inside of an Uno application. And here's a new sample that we've added recently that allows to add the support for this into all the .NET 6 and 7 targets, including WebAssembly. And that one is actually particularly important because being able to store data in your app is actually quite important. And if you're making a completely local app, or you don't rely on anything that comes from a server side for storage, then that can be important. So let's just take a look quickly at what that app does and what was the specificities of that content. So you can see here that the application has 4 heads. The Windows one, Visual Studio decides to leave me alone here. It's loading up. Okay, so the Windows, WASM, SkillGTK, and mobile. So others are supported as well, but that's those are the targets that are for this sample specifically. And for WebAssembly, there are a few things that were needed. And let me just zoom up a little bit. So one of the parts that was interesting, and actually it looks like I should have been resizing my window. So let me just do this because I forgot about this. It's way too small for you to take a look at what I'm doing. So let me just change that. Now, hopefully, changing the scaling of the window is not going to break everything up. Let's see if I do this in real time, if it works. Wow, it looks like it did work. So it should be better now. Okay, so yeah, I generally tend to make the zoom a bit bigger so that we can see everything properly. And it looks like I still do have a few things to change here. There you go. That's best. So I use a larger scale so that it looks better when projecting, particularly because it's not the right size. Anyways, so one of the few things that needed to be added compared to the previous sample, well, actually we didn't have any Entity Framework core sample, but you can see here that it's actually using now Entity Framework, the version 7. It uses the Microsoft Data SQLite core version 7 as well. And then there are a few additional changes that have been made by AirSync from SQLite PCL raw, which is the support for what are called unmanaged callers. So this is for callbacks when you're doing async calls through to native code, and that was added. So this is it removes kind of a set of fixes that were needed to get to SQLite to work on WebAssembly. And now the latest one is the support for Uno SQLite WASM, and it's been updated to the latest version of SQLite for multiple reasons. But the first one is that there was a security issue in the version that we were using, so that one is fixed now. But also the use of entity framework required the use of snapshots. So there's a snapshot feature that's integrated into SQLite and was not built into the version that we're using. So you can actually go take a look at the changes that were made for this. Let's go here and we search for SQLite, and then we find the SQLite WASM folder, and then we go take a look at the last PR. So we can see here that it's an update to 340. We can see here the update for this, and then we can see that we now have the ability to have snapshots enabled for that build. So that makes it work properly with EF Core, and the sample is actually quite simple. Actually, let's go and let's run it for WebAssembly directly here. So I just cloned the repo, and we're gonna see if the experience is the right one for all of you if you're running for this app for your testing. If you're testing this sample directly on your machine, so that should be good enough. So those kind of builds are taking a little bit longer for a single reason. It's because it's using native code. So when you're including SQLite WASM, it uses an actual binary that's been pre-built, and that binary needs to be linked in with the existing .NET runtime that's part of the UNO platform packages, and then when everything needs to be packaged up, then it needs to be compiled as a separate item. So there you go. So that's the application, and I think I enabled logging by default. So let's see. If I do this, I click test, and hopefully it should work properly. There you go. So I added my new string. I can add again, and then we can see that we're adding items to the database multiple times. And one of the interesting things about that sample specifically, if I'm not closing too much, one interesting part of that sample is that it has a data provider here. I'm sorry, the blogging context here. And then you have the blog. I can find in the blogging context, there's a way to set the logging here. So if you uncomment this part on the configuring of the DB context from EF Core, you're going to be able to enable either the WebAssembly logger or using the console. And you're going to get interesting logs that are getting out of EF Core to get everything that's happening inside of the app. So we should be getting this very soon once the app starts. So it's a pretty simple sample. There was the only trick that needs to be happening when you're running with WebAssembly is this part. And you need to have a SQLite provider that's specific for WebAssembly, otherwise nothing will start. And once you're set up properly with that simple line that sets up SQLite for SQLite PCL raw, you're gonna be good to go. So now if I start everything up again, you're gonna be able to see all the queries that are sent back and forth to the SQLite engine that runs in the browser. So we can see here that we're querying SQLite master, and then inserting a blog, and then querying again to get all the blogs, and then doing I don't know what else that needs to be done. So that's really interesting to see what's happening, and you get all those details for free with that sample. So that's it for SQLite and EF Core. Okay, so Mr. X is asking, what is that if wasn't specific to the UNO SQLite package? So no, it's not. Well, so it's specific. It could probably run on all platforms, I would guess. The thing is that that particular provider may be slower on other platforms, and there's a reason for this. And it's because it uses the DLL imports. So when you're running that particular provider on the other targets, what is going to happen is that so it needs to go through data and import and Eric Sync for that particular library. There's other providers that are faster that don't go through data import, and I'm pretty sure that it's going to be implementing a new one that uses library import, which is the new one for .NET 7, which actually goes a lot faster than data import. So yes, it may work on all platforms. This is specific to Uno, but if you don't want to use the WASM, you may just continue using it and use that part. You may if your app is not particularly performance specific, then you may use it anyways. So that's it. So now let's go to the. So we have an issue that's been opened, and it's called support for changes in point collection. So the issue title is not exactly the right one, but the idea is that this user, Todd Glodek, created a sample showing that there should be something happening on the WinUI side, and then when you run on WebAssembly, you only see the line on the side, the green one, and not the purple one. So we're gonna go take a look at what that code does and try to figure out why it's not working properly. So let's start the app and see what take a look at what it does. So I'm going to be taking a look at the Windows one. So it lets me set a start project. So I'm going to start that version of the app, so the Windows one, just to figure out if it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, and then we're going to poke at the code and see what we can find and what we can change. Okay, so we have this, and so we don't see the green line, but it's at the bottom here, probably because my screen is too large. Because my scaling is too large, so we're probably gonna be moving everything up a little bit so that it shows up more on the center of the screen. So let's see, we have a polyline panel, if I'm not mistaken, and then we can try to change a few things around this so we can see that there's a static line translation. We can probably change that number. Let's X translation. So that's the X. That's test size. That is yeah, okay. So that's probably too large. So let's make it smaller. Let's go for 600 and 500 and see if we get something that is easier to work with. Okay, that's easier to work with. So we're supposed to be having on WebAssembly that green line on the side and that pink line on the other side, as well as the markers that are available here. Okay, so if I run this app on WebAssembly, what do I get? So it should be compiling a lot faster. There you go. Okay, so it's running the wrong app, and there's a good reason for this. It's because the older app is still running. So there's that, and I should probably closing the EF Core sample as well. So I open Visual Studio, should not have been. Okay, so if we restart, probably gonna be, yeah, let's try with that one. Okay, so I see just a green line. So it's supposed to be close here, but it's not showing. So to be able to debug a bit more easily, we're going to be adding a version of the Polyline test that uses GTK. So let's go and just do this. So in a terminal, we're going to do .NET new and create a new. So let's create that. And new app, and we're going to call it the same way. So Polyline test with the same casing. And then, oh, I see McNets is here. Thanks for joining. And we're done. So we're gonna copy over the GTK version of the app to the existing set of packages here, projects here. There we go. Okay, so let's see if GTK has the same issue. The assumption is that it should be. What does it fail? Okay, it needs an additional NuGet package. That's probably at the top. Community Toolkit MVVM. So let's add this package and see what we get. So I see a few people have joined. Welcome. If you have any questions related to the stream or what I'm doing or anything else, just let me know. So we have our GTK. I see Yuri is here. Hey, Yuri. Okay, so we have our green line here. So it's not enough. Now, and I took a look at the sample before. So there's a few issues in the sample, just not that one, but a few others. So one thing to know is that the unloaded event is called a little bit differently than what it is when running on WinUI. So what that does is that on WinUI, this is called earlier, and in Uno it's called later. So it means that the content of the children here for the panel is actually cleared too early. So if I start the app again, you'll see that the content and the dots should be showing up. Property, border thickness. So okay, so there's a few other things that are there. So using a new property that's been added in WinUI that we have not implemented yet. So let's close this one up as well. And we should be having dots. There you go. Okay, so we have our dots here, but we don't have the polyline that's showing. The polyline's not showing up. So I'm gonna try to figure out why it's not showing up. So if we take a look at the code for the arrange, and while we're there, so this is something that that's always interesting, and this can be written as a simple of type. It's exactly the same. So you can go from where get type of cast to of type, and it does exactly the same thing. So it's a little bit easier to write. So let's go take a look at what the rendering does in Uno. So in WinUI, we're going to see what we get, but in Uno, we're going to be seeing if we get something interesting. Okay, so when the content is arranging, which means that it's going to be laid out in the screen, we should be having some interesting information. So we know that the file size should be 984 by 760. And we have our size here. Why don't we have our size here? Locals. Okay, so the size for the final size from the overall grid is what it should be. So it's probably window size, if I'm not mistaken. And then we're drawing a static line for which the desired size is 252 by 422. So that's why it shows up. And now if we take a look at the dynamic line, and it does have points, so that's good. We can see 80 minus 80 and all the points that are there. But the problem is that if you take a look at the desired size, it says 152 by 0. So that means that the shape has a width, but not a height. So it may be a problem for rendering because the size should be something that's a lot bigger than that. So it may be because we're rendering something with a polyline. So we can see here that it's a polyline. So both are polylines, probably with a similar content. So let's go take a look at the polylines contents. So if I take the dynamic points here, and I take the static line points, So I do have points. So do I have the same numbers? Not exactly the same numbers. The interesting part is that the static line has all positives and the dynamic line has negatives. So maybe it's caused by that. I don't know. It's not supposed to. It looks like it's doing the right things with the width, but not the height. So if we continue, we can see that the desired size so it's not the right one. And of course, when rendering, it does not do anything. So what we could try is take a look at what, if we can maybe measure the dynamic line differently. So maybe we can measure here with a different size. Maybe try to force it to be remeasured, maybe. So let's see if we get something different. But if it doesn't work, or so even if it works, which is incorrect, we're gonna have to go dig into what the polyline does and how it measures itself to see if we can get to something more interesting. Okay, so we're measuring again, and the desired size is still the same. So measuring is still incorrect even with the position. So the new measuring. So that's completely incorrect. So what we could do is try maybe to arrange with a different size. So let's say we use the static line desired size maybe, because it's different size, it's non-zero. Maybe we can get something different. And if not, we're gonna build a custom version of Uno, and we're gonna try to go and debug everything up to see if we can get something to display. So it's still not working, because it's supposed to be having the same size, but definitely still not displaying properly. Okay. Then let's go figure out why we don't get the desired size. So I do have a Visual Studio opened with Uno here, and so I've been explaining this a few times with yeah, hi Dan. Yes, still using a Sarah project. It's boring. Well, it's not finished, but we're gonna get there. So this version of the app is using WinUI here. So what we're doing is going to be using the branch that's converted to WinUI. So this one dates back from a week ago, or a bit more. No, 11.22. So it's a bit more. It's a bit older than that. So what we're going to do is upgrade to the latest version of it. So I pulled the latest, and it's been updated today. So we're going to be resetting the branch to use the latest pieces of Uno, and then we're going to be building everything up. So the branch that I'm using here is called Generated Master WinUI Auto Convert. This is a branch that is automatically updated to the latest WinUI sources that are coming from Uno, because Uno is built using UWP for now. We're going to be probably during the next year change to swap so that the sources in Uno, so the master branches, are using WinUI, and then we're going to convert to UWP for people that are still using UWP. And we have a lot of those. So now we can go and open this. So I love that bug. I don't know if you've seen, but I changed branch, and this was empty, and I click on that button, and it reloaded everything up. So it was not supposed to do anything, but it does. So interesting bug. Okay, so now we're going to be opening the Net7 version for this test, and we're going to be using the Net7 target. We want to override Skia GTK 173. Is it the latest? I'm not too sure. Let's bump to the latest to be sure. So updates. We're gonna update everything, or almost everything. So everything in Uno specifically. So there you go. The bootstrapper, not super easy. And okay, let's update all this. So what we're going to do is take the version that we're going to be using, which is for 7 dev 535. So 535. So what we're doing here is overriding the NuGet cache so that we're going to be using the proper binaries. And now we go to open the solution filter that is related to Skia. And we're going to be building it once so that we get access to the sources in release, so that when we get into measure, we go to the right place with debugging symbols properly set. Because when we're using source link, it's sometimes not debug versions, so it makes it a bit more difficult to work with. Okay. So let's rebuild this. So while we're waiting for the build to happen, we're going to go to see what the Polyline does and see if there's something obvious that may not work. So we have a Skia version of Polyline and a WASM version of Polyline. So we can see that the arrange and measure are calling measure absolute shape here. And does the WASM one call the same thing? Not really. So it's calling something different. So we can see there's already a bit of difference between the two. So it may not be the same bug, but we'll see. We'll see. Okay, so arranged absolute shape. So that one does not exist yet because the build is not complete yet. Try to find. So it's still populating the cache. So it will take a bit of time to get there. So let's search the older way. Okay, so shape, layout, arrange, absolute shape. So we're supposed to be in here. And it's a doozy. It's a very large one. So we're gonna have fun taking a look at why we're not getting anything right. Okay, so it's still gray. So it may be because we have two versions of this particular file. Yes, yeah, it's not the right one. So we're not looking at the right version of that method. So I guess there's another one. Okay, so we still have to wait for the build to finish. And for some reason, it's not doing anything. So let's see, is Visual Studio actually doing something? No, it's not doing anything. Okay. That is fun. Okay, so maybe it's because I closed it a bit too early, maybe. Enjoy the previews, but not necessarily just the previews. So I have Uno here, so let me kill that one. Let's try again. So it looks like it happens when there's that. So it looks like a deadlock or something. When Visual Studio has not started completely restoring all the packages that it should be restoring, and then you start a build, and then at that point it just locks up. That's not super fun. I don't know if it happens in your projects. I mean, it happens in the Uno solution specifically, but have you seen this? If you're using Visual Studio, or have you seen this in your projects? If you're using the preview versions, because it's a sort of interesting thing where Microsoft is going to be asking for a repro for good reasons, but I don't know how to reproduce it. I'm trying, but it happens when it wants. So okay, so it looks like I'm getting popular. A lot of bots that are lots of bots that are showing up today. Okay, so let's rebuild again and let's see if we get something more interesting. Okay, so the restoring is working this time. So we're getting there. Okay, so we should still be having something that that gives us access to the polyline. Okay, so McNet is saying I'm having some issues building CS samples for Net7. So what kind of issues are you getting? Is it not building at all? Is it, what is it, what kind of issues are you getting? Okay, so we have polyline segments. Not super interesting that way. So what else do we have? Polyline. No, it should be that. Maybe it's casing. Ah, casing is important. Okay. Okay, so we have the Skia version of this particular method. So it's still building, so that's good. We're getting somewhere. Yeah, we're gonna have something very soon. Okay, so measure shape. Still not available. We can see here that we don't have anything available yet, so it's still loading. So we're gonna wait a little bit. And okay, so it's working properly. So okay, there you go. Measure shape layout. Okay, so that's working properly. So it's the same one. That's the good part. And we have yeah, okay, so it's using Skia, so that's fine. So we're using Skia. So that means that inside here, we're trying to get the bounds of the path and we're not getting it properly. And my guess would be that we have the get path here that's supposed to be returning something interesting, and for which the measuring of the size, for whatever reason, is not returning the right values. So we're gonna get to that point. So it's still building. And do we have everything working properly? Yes, it's working properly. Just gonna wait for the last few projects to build in parallel, which is always interesting. And we should be good to go. Okay, so most of those have built properly. So let's rebuild this one app, and then we're going to dive into what measure does and see if we can find something interesting. Okay, so loading all the symbols, and then we get to, should be getting to our measure, then dig it to the rest. So we can see that we have our Uno source generators, Uno DLL. Okay, so we have some generators here. Okay, so can I jump into code? Is it a local path? Yes, it is a local path. So you can see that the preview of the file is my local path on my machine. So I have the available size that's set properly. Now we're going to dig into what we're doing with all that measure. So we're measuring in do measure. So this is the complex part of the measuring, but we're going to dig into one part, which is the actual measure of the content. And it's done in measure core here. Or it should be. Did I miss something? Or maybe it's done at a different location. It's probably done at a different location. So I thought it was. Okay. So let's resize a little bit. So it's dirty. Okay, so we're doing measure core. So we measure. So probably gonna put a breakpoint directly in Polyline. The Polyline file is gonna be easier. So let me go to Skia here. Just gonna do a measure override here to see if we get to that location. Okay, so we're getting to the right location. So we have the size that we had before, so the measure from the polyline, and then we're gonna dig into that measure absolute shape. So we can see that we're getting the path, which is fine. So we're getting C line 2, so that's good. And we dive into measure absolute shape. This is all grayed out, but that's fine. Okay, so let's take a look at the locals. What kind of values do we get? So user size, there's no stretch, there's no nothing. There's no min size, there's no max size. Now we get to the interesting part. So we have a thing that gets the path bounds. So maybe it's caused by this. So let's go into the path bounds. So we're supposed to be having something that looks like so we're getting a square rectangle, and the path bounds are 0, 0. Okay, so that's not good. That's not good at all. We're supposed to be having something that's a lot more interesting than that. And path bounds. Okay, no, it's probably because I was on path sides. Okay, so path bounds says 70 by 120 at 80 minus 200. So this is good for now, at least. The path size is determined to be 70, 120. So now we can do the computation for the stretch and natural path size. So that's the return value for the path that we are trying to determine. So the path natural size, so this is a local variable. It says, oh, that is interesting. Okay, so you can see now that the path size is negative. So that's why it's getting clamped at 0. So now why do we get this? It could be because the path bounds are negative, but it's not supposed to be giving us something of that nature. So we have the path bounds to not a number. So if path bounds are not 0, we're getting something interesting. This is definitely wrong. Or maybe it's the way that we're building the path bounds that is incorrect. Because we're getting the right and the bottom, and then we're assuming that it's the width and height. But it looks like we're not building the right thing here. So it could be because it's none. I think we're building that particular size differently. No, we're building the size. Okay, so that's definitely wrong. That's definitely wrong, but it may not be because of the fact that the path bounds are outside of the screen, or are negative, because that means it's outside of some position. So it says location. So that's interesting because we're using, so if you take a look at this, we're saying that the path bounds are 0, then we're using the width. And if it's not, we're using the right and bottom to do computation, but I don't see why that makes sense. No, I don't think, Yuri, I don't think it's related to inverting the y-axis. It looks like it may be something that was specific to the implementation on another platform, maybe. So if we take a look at the sources for that part, so we go to arrange the measure, take a look at that specific line. So we're going to take a look at why that was added there. I say make nets. So to make sure that you're installing the latest version of UnoCheck, that is something that you can find on platform.uno and on the docs. And when you go to whichever finalizing the environment, you can see that you can install the tool here, but if you want to install for .NET 7, you need to run it this way. So .NET tool update and then uno check. That will use the latest version that is linked to .NET 7. We're probably going to be changing the version number as well so that it fits and matches, because it's a bit difficult there to understand what you're going to get there. Okay, so if we go back to our thing here, I wrote this, so that means that I did the wrong code. Invalid shape positioning for 1 pixel thickness. So that's interesting. So let's see why. So probably the code wasn't there. Was exactly wait, it was different at that time. So okay, so there's a stroke thickness that was done that way previously, but definitely that's not why we did that. Okay, so we're gonna try and figure where that comes from. So we're gonna go to that line in the blame mode, and we're using the blame with prior change. So search for path natural size, that was there a long time ago. Okay, so that was for Skia specifically. And that code is probably reused in multiple locations and likely to be used on WebAssembly as well. So it looks like we're doing the same computation in multiple locations. So if the path bounds are at 0, we're manipulating the size the same way twice. Oh, it's the arrange. Oh, so we're doing it again in arrange. So we're doing that particular computation twice. So I don't recall why we're saying that if the path is origined at 0, we're not getting the width. I think it's just wrong because of the fact that the path bounds where when you're taking a look at 0, the right is just the right one. It's just it's just the same as the width. But the stroke thickness, when they're at 0, it's supposed to be pushing for the full thickness, but not when the path is at 0. It's probably something that that has been changed by Martin Zikmund. We're gonna have to figure if it's something that is actually valid. So we're gonna make a change. We're gonna make a change and just adjust the we're gonna be adjusting Skia here to be in here. So we're going to be using width and height instead, so that we ignore the actual position of the shape because it's not the right one. And we're going to be changing that again into the stretching here. So let's do width. I think I wrote the wrong thing here. Did I do the same thing? No. Okay, so width and height. Okay, so the value that needs to change, we're probably going to be refactoring this a little bit. But the stroke thickness is important here, so we don't want to have the overflow happening again. So let's rebuild quickly and see if it helps with the positioning. So what that means also is that that computation does not happen on the other modes. But the problem is that the other modes are not using the natural size of the shape, so that's not good. So I mean, it's going to be resizing to the actual size of the actual positioning and size of the parent. So that's not interesting. So we're gonna have to take a look at what that change is doing specifically for the stretch mode none. So stretch none is the default value for so the stretch property for Polyline. That's why I'm taking a look at that mode specifically. Okay, so it's rebuilt. Let's take a look. Actually, did it? No, no. Oh no, it didn't override the. It did not override the PDBs, so I'm not gonna get a way to debug properly. Okay, so we're in fluent themes, just waiting for the other parts to build. They're built. Okay, so let's rebuild the sample app again and see if the change is looking better. But this is definitely wrong. That means that we probably have tested paths. We probably have tested paths that are only located at the root or the origin, or in the positive side. So they're not drawing negatively. Now, I'm not sure if that's not going to cause some other issue with clipping. So we'll see if that's something that needs to change. Okay. So is it better now? Not really. Okay, so we have something else now that happens. But let's go still take a look at the measure desired size for the dynamic line, I would guess. Or maybe it's because I changed the. Let's use the right measurements instead, because I was using the static line measuring side, so it could be different. Yeah, definitely. So BT ords 0 is saying that we should translate the coordinates. Yes, definitely. So it's something that can be done. The point here is to try to determine if it's something that we're doing incorrectly in Uno with regards to drawing shapes. I mean, it could be a workaround for the person that's trying to get to that specific feature. But we can try to find out if there's something that we can do first. So it's still not showing up. So let's see what we do have with our dynamic line and if it's actually getting the desired size again. Okay, so the desired size is better. It's showing something correctly. I'm sorry, it's measuring something correctly, which is good, but it's not showing up. Now, the reason it may not be showing up is because it's now on the negative side, and we may want to see if you can push it to be visible. So I think this is done through the view model here, maybe. Oh, the panel scale. I don't know where that's done. Let's see. Ah, there we go. Okay, so we have vertices. Why are the values negative in that context? I'm not too sure. Is it because of the translation? No. Oh, it's point inverted axis. So that's probably that one. What is it doing? Okay, so it's inverting the axis. Okay, so maybe we can just take the vertex itself, double, actual size as a point. Okay, so we're gonna try to figure if it's caused by the negative size. So we're gonna be using the vertexes directly as a point. It's a bit curious. It's using a key value pair as a the sample is using a key value pair as an XY. That's interesting. Deja vu for the annotation engine I built. I am porting it to Wasm and Skillshare this month. It's very yes, I'm sure. Yeah, well, coordinates and things. Yeah, always interesting. Clipping is a fun beast. So do I have something now? Oh, look at that. We have something. Okay, so it actually is showing up. So let's take a look at the the coordinates that we have in the polyline to see if it actually is related to the positioning. It may not be, may be completely something else. But we're gonna have to figure this one out. So is it because it could also be because the position of the shape was outside of the screen. Could have been. Okay, so the position, yeah, everything's positive now, so that makes it visible. Okay, so we could probably do something like to test the point. Let's see. We could move it around a little bit to see if we can have something interesting. So let's see what the Windows version does with that positioning. Because I removed the vertical shift, so I'm not too sure if that may be related. The vertical offset that was there originally. So let's use this originally and see if it actually shows something. If it does not, it may be because of the negative value. So let's see. Okay, so no, it's still showing something up. So that's the right location. Now, I'm not too sure why. So let's actually show the background of the panel. Polyline panel, background light yellow. Okay, so it really is light yellow. And that will be the panel in between. Okay, so that's good. We could probably have let's add let's add something at 0, 0 to see where that comes from. Okay, so 0, 0 is at the bottom left. So if it shows that way, let's see what the GTK version does. Okay, so the point is, okay, that is wrong. That is wrong as well. Let me see. Is it different that much? I don't remember. So we can see that the shape was okay. So we have another problem. So the shape is not drawn correctly. It was supposed to be drawn in the middle here at 0, 0, but it's not positioned properly. So that's one of the other issues that we have with the positioning of shapes. So we're gonna have to figure this one out as well. Maybe not this time though, but that's gonna be a good report for an issue. Okay, so we have a line here, but the line here is not showing up. So the pink line is not showing up. Okay, so what values do we get when we get to 0, 0? I wonder, because the fact that it's negative is not supposed to be changing anything. Or maybe it's because there's a translation somewhere. And there's a translation with that part that may be impacting. So let's see. Oh, okay. So maybe it's that. There's that 5 pixel that's showing something up here. Maybe you don't support translation for ellipses. Could be something. That may explain why we have something different. Or parts of it. Oh, yes, it's at the top. I didn't see it. Sharp eye, Darren. Okay, so that's completely wrong. Okay, that's interesting. Why is that? Okay, so that means that the inversion of positioning that was done probably by the piece of code that we have there. Okay, well, Visual Studio just completely crashed. Oh, it's doing the Dr. Watson. Yeah, it's Dr. Watsoning on me. Okay, so let's open another one. Yeah, definitely. It looks like two different coordinate systems. For instance, that looks like it. So probably there's something. Either the sample is doing something specific for Uno, could be, or where we have another bigger problem. So let's search that one. So we have some position that are happening here. So we have the inverted y-axis. Or maybe it's using something that is not. Ah, yes. Okay, so we're inverting this. We're inverting the position using something that was different. So we're using size here to invert. Maybe there's a way. There's another inversion that's happening. So I think it was done in there. Are we inverting somewhere? I thought there was another one. Oh, there you go. Actual size. Okay, so that may explain. Because actual size is not necessarily updated properly at that location. So that may explain why the shift that may have needed to happen is not happening. So let's see. Actual size is such a weird property. I mean, you're not too sure when that's gonna get updated. You get a value, but it's not always the one that you need. It may be lagging by 1. There you go. That's the bug. Okay, so actual size is not defined at that location. So that does explain why this is happening, because actual size is only defined after the control has been rendered. So it's updated through. So in Uno, it's updated through layout updated, the layout updated event. So if this is called too early, it's not going to work. So yeah, definitely. So yes, it's similar to when loaded happens. It needs to be refreshed at the right time. But in general, in that case, it may be interesting to move that code to be done in measure, for instance. So let's say we flag something like, let's see. So let's move this to another location. So we're going to do refresh collections and okay, didn't want to do that for some reason. Okay, so we can't use that because we're having new items. So we're going to have to store the items somewhere. New items. So we're adding new items. Yeah, the code is a bit odd in that case. Because we're adding new items to the list. For the children here. How can we refactor that piece so that we have something interesting? So it's only modifying the new items and adding those to the children. And then it's modifying the line to move it up based on the actual size. So we can't use that. That's interesting. What should we do instead? Because it's only collection change, so it's updating the collection on collection changed, but it's also modifying the size on actual size. But that's the thing. So it may not change the position of the vertices based on the right sizing. Yeah, we can see here that it's positioning the line at the bottom of the window, at the bottom of the parent's size, but without knowing it first. So it's probably not the right way to do it. Yeah, there's probably a bit of changes that need to be done. So the origin. So that what we can see here is that the actual issue is not really about the dynamic line, so the polyline not having anything to work with. It's because of the fact that actual size is not at the right value at that location. So that we need to adjust the points, the new points that are added to the dynamic line to have the right value. So we're not good at that. We're not good at that point. So if we want to position ourselves at the right location, we're going to need to adjust the positioning at the end. Yeah, it's probably something that needs to be done. So that collection needs to be done only once. Modifying the line should be done only once based on a set of changes that have been queued up, so that the override is done the right way. So that each vertices of the dynamic line is actually taking the final size as the right size. And that's something that's interesting, because when you do a range override, you don't necessarily know when that actual size is going to be, what the actual size is going to be, and it may be lagging one behind. So for instance, that is called first, and then that is never called afterwards. So it needs to be moving up and down as a result, and that's not going to be the right way to do it. So what we could do to cheat a little bit and to make sure that it actually does what we think it should be doing is to change this to be called after the loaded of the underlying control is done. So let's do something like this. We're going to dispatch, so that's dispatcher queue, run async. No, it's not run async, it's try and queue. And we're going to be executing that code late, just by using the try and queue. Let's see if it changes something. In general, it's not a good idea to rely on actual size to do anything, because it's always the wrong value, and you may not see it because it's a small difference, if you're changing the window size. But if you're changing the window size in large chunks, the value may be different and may not be the right one. So there you go. So it looks like everything's okay except for those. and for those, and it looks like it's actually a missing feature. It's a missing feature because we have a translation that's supposed to be happening here, and it's not happening. And we can see here that it says that translation is not implemented in Uno, and that's a good reason. There's a good reason for that. So it's something that we could probably implement because people are not seeing it. They're missing the rendered transform. So let's go for rendered transform instead. Render transform, and then we're going to do the translate transform instead. And it's going to be X and Y -5. Because we know the size of that. So the translation is not working, which is expected. And that should fix it. Well, visually at least. There you go. That's a lot better. Okay, so we found a few things. We found a few things during this stream. We found out that unloaded here is called differently. That's something that we do know in Uno. There's actually a whole epic about this. If you search for control initialization, I think. Control initialization sequence. So that one is a big one, and there's a lot of bugs that are associated to it. that are related to the fact that the controls are getting loaded before they're actually used properly. So it's it makes for differences in behavior when you're comparing with WinUI. So that's the first one. The second one is that translation here is not implemented. So we probably could be doing a random transform manipulation to implement that one, so people don't see what that does. So that's an easy one to have. Yes, it is related to the ellipsis size, so it's half the size of the ellipsis. So if I remove this from WinUI, you're going to see that it actually does the same thing. It's not. Let's see. So if I do this, if we run that on Windows, it's going to do the exact same thing. I would think. Panel or ranges. What did I do? Cannot deploy because oh, that's a bug in probably because the app is running. There you go. The app is running. Okay, so there you go. So you see, even on WinUI, so if you don't compensate for the size, so it renders itself at the right location. So if you want it to be positioned at the same position, so in the middle of the position of the line, you have to move it. So if you move it, you can use either render transform, which is pretty much the same thing as translation, probably a shortcut. So it moves it to the right location, or you can use translation, but that one is not implemented in Uno yet. So we're gonna have to open an issue and move it to the right place. So that's the other part. And now the last issue is, and that's something that we can't really adjust at that point because we're not measuring exactly the same thing. It's related to control initialization sequence as well. It's because we're loading the control at the different times than what WinUI does. So actual size is not updated at the right time. So if you're relying on actual size, you're going to get wrong results. Most of the times they're going to be either late or just plain 0, because you're not getting the size because the control has not been rendered yet. So that's one of the things that is to be on the lookout for. So there's that. That's interesting. So I think it was a good one. We found a few things, so a few interesting things with that sample and a bug. Oh, and I forgot. There's actually a bug that we're gonna have to fix in Uno, which is we're computing the size of the path incorrectly in a non-stretch. So that's at least 3 issues or 2 or 3 issues to update and link, and a fix to push for that one because it's completely incorrect. So there you go. I hope you learned a bunch, and I hope I can see you next week on a new session of the Uno Live Coding, the weekly live coding. So up until then, happy coding and bye for now.